Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and hello again, everyone. Welcome to Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, running through the show times once again. APB, RCS, show times 5:30 p.m. and KUAC 9.4, also 5:30 p.m. and 360 North at 7:30 and 5 a.m. the following morning for Alaska Public Media. And satellite imagery for yesterday showed high clouds, a little bit of moisture, not much in the way of any precipitation with that, rolling by to the south, a little bit to the more there, or a little bit more up to the north, all the way to the eastern Arctic coast, a breakout behind it, and looked like a little bit of moisture there over the southern southeast coast, right through here, clearing out to the north and back to the west, and way out to the west there over the western Bering. You can see the next front, which today is edged a little farther to the east, and we had some moisture streaming northward here across the eastern Aleutians and the Pribilofs there, spreading rain possibly as far north as St. Matthew Island during the afternoon hours today, and really not much in the way of precipitation with that, just a few hundredths, but quite windy out across the Alaska Peninsula today in the eastern Aleutians. The Pribilofs, actually pretty good winds out of the south extending all the way up through the Bering Strait there to the far western Arctic coast through here. And this front out here, a little weaker. There's some rain here between Shimmy and Adak, possibly a little bit heavier than with this system here. But over the interior, high pressure building in, just high clouds here to the north, moisture with a warm front streaming into the northwest there, and kind of cloudy here over the upper Yukon, or over the eastern Tanana Valley. But breaking out over the Copper River Basin, sunshine today across southern Alaska, back up to the northwest, Kuskokwim Valley, up into here, Bristol Bay, good, Kodiak Island, a lot of sunshine, and also the southeast coast, looking mostly clear today. And on the chart, here's why, pretty good high pressure, actually fairly strong, 1,037 millibars, right in over the interior areas, and clockwise flow around that, producing offshore flow there for the Panhandle as well as all of the North Gulf Coast. North winds kicking up to 45 miles an hour at least today in Valdez, and so pretty breezy along the coastal areas there, Seward, and temperatures in some locations rose into the 60s today. Sunshine, lighter winds through Kodiak Island on up to the north, and then areas of clouds streaming eastward here, coming up over the top of the high, but the stronger winds here gusting anywhere from 35 to 45 miles an hour, possibly even 50 miles an hour today. Alaska Peninsula over toward the eastern Aleutians, pretty gusty winds, about 45 there for the Pribilofs, and roughly 30 to 35-ish there for St. Lawrence Island, and then rain there over the northwest interior, light rain and fog there, Kotzebue, and even over the southern Seward Peninsula areas northward, Cape Lisburne seeing a gust to 55 miles per hour right out of the south today, and more in the 25 to 35 mile an hour range for Kivalina and Point Hope, even lighter winds here onto the southeast. But out to the west, the winds drop off here, kind of in between systems there for the central Aleutian areas. And this front out here quite weak, just some light precipitation there over the western Aleutians. And right on the edge there, you can see the next low center, which tonight pulls northward, and that's going to increase the wind and rain across the central and eastern Aleutians. I'll probably see a little bit heavier in the way of precip moving into the Fox Islands tonight, and possibly even the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure holding here to the east, so the gradient's going to increase here as this system pulls northward, and you can see quite windy conditions with occasional light rain and fog all the way up into St. Lawrence Island. This warm front moisture spreads eastward there, the warmer air, so maybe some light precipitation moving across the eastern Arctic coast tonight, but nothing significant at all. Variable clouds here over the northern interior. High pressure center pulls eastward there, almost 1,040 millibars over the Yukon now, and clear skies, light winds across southern Alaska. Still a little gusty this evening along the North Gulf Coast and probably throughout the night tonight, but nothing really strong at all. No winds for Kodiak Island, and winds on the increase here over the southeast coast with that building pressure to the north there. There's a high wind warning out for the northern panhandle, well actually for the Juneau-Douglas area, starting about 1 p.m. tonight and extending through 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Look for the winds to increase north-northeast, 40 miles an hour, possible gusts to 70 miles an hour, and that'll occur again late tonight and through tomorrow afternoon, but that'll be accompanied by sunshine. Could see more in the way of clouds down here to the south, disturbance dropping southward in the upper air, kicking off a few showers here mostly or to the east there, and that might throw a few clouds down to the south. Otherwise, pretty good conditions, pretty breezy across all of the southeast coast, lighter winds down to the south, of course stronger up to the north, and otherwise moving on to tomorrow, we'll see pretty good gradient now right across the Alaska Peninsula. Storm warnings out in advance of that front. Heavy rain at times there moving in as well, with pretty good rain and wind all the way up to the Bering Strait, with rainfall just grazing the southwest coast tomorrow here. High pressure still holding this back to the west with most of the action moving northward, but whole pattern is going to be shifting eastward, and behind that low center, northwesterly gales coming into the western Aleutians, or I'm sorry, the central Aleutians, diminishing on out to the west, along with rain changing to showers, and quite windy here across the southeast coast. Again, high wind warning out for the Juneau-Douglas area through tomorrow. Lots of sunshine across the entire panhandle there, right out into the Gulf of Alaska and off the coast. Nothing but sun here for Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, northward all the way up to the Brooks Range, and just some leftover moisture up there. Nothing very significant at all, and the gradient making for pretty light winds as well, although they increase back to the west there, and stays quite windy all the way down across the Kotzebue Sound area. And of course down along the coast where we've got mostly just gale warnings out here for the southwest coast and the Bering Sea. The only storm warning there for the Alaska Peninsula for tomorrow. Then tomorrow night, storm warnings hit the southwest coast during the overnight hours, and then on Saturday, as that low center pulls up to Nunivak Island, that's going to westerly winds coming around the south side of that's going to drive this front eastward. And so look for rain and wind to spread into Bristol Bay during the night tomorrow night and into Saturday, moving into Kodiak Island with the winds. Gales out for Bristol Bay on Saturday in advance of the front, diminishing, becoming a little more westerly back out there to the west, but still looking at gales here, western Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians and back up to the Pribilofs. Pretty windy conditions with some showers for Saturday, and then improving a little bit back here to the west. That next storm pretty weak by comparison to this one, but still bringing some moisture in out that way. Otherwise, first day of the weekend looks dry here over much of mainland Alaska. The exception, as I mentioned, out here to the south, spreading northward to the southern Seward Peninsula, but less wind, a lot less wind here for the Panhandle, and sunshine continuing with that condition right up all the way to the Arctic coast there, that offshore flow, or basically south to north winds, keeping a pretty nice, definitely VFR and maybe mostly clear skies. On to temperatures across the Panhandle this afternoon, mostly in the 50s, 62 at Skagway, one of the warmer locations, otherwise 58 down at Klawock, 55 in Yakutat, Cordova at 59 degrees, 50s to lower 60s here across Prince William Sound, Seward at 61, 50 there at Gulkana. Up in the Tanana Valley, 45 to 50, Fairbanks did reach 50 degrees with Tanana at 47, and mid 40s here, Bettles over to Fort Yukon, and 30s here through the Brooks Range. And then the warmer conditions up along the Arctic coast now, 40s from Barrow and Etusuk westward to almost 50 degrees there at not Point Leyva, Cape Lisburne. Upper 30s or even approaching 40 there in the eastern Arctic coast. 40s to mid 50s here across Kotzebue Sound. Nomad 45 today, and lower 50s here over the west central interior with McGrath at 52. 52 also at Sleepmute, 53 there at Bethel. So really not much variation in the temperatures out here. 48 over on St. Lawrence Island there at Gamble, with lower 50s all the way to the southwest coast. Lower 50s for the Pribilofs, mid 50s central Aleutians, a little chillier out towards Shemya, and lower to mid 50s here for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. King salmon did push into the 60s. For lows tonight, 30s to lower 40s across the Panhandle. Quite a variation. Of course, windy areas stay warmer, and the calm areas will be considerably chillier. Otherwise, eastern interior, teens and 20s right down in the Copper River Basin, and all the way up to the Brooks Range. Much milder now up along the Arctic coast there, especially on the west side, 40s, which extends all the way down the west coast there. And the warmest locations, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, lows in the lower to mid 50s under that mild southerly wind flow. And then for highs tomorrow, mid to upper 50s, Bristol Bay, up into the west central interior areas. 40s and 50s, Tanana Valley, cooling to about 40 there for the Brooks Range, and 40s for the Arctic coast and North Slope, warmest west, and 50s to near 60 for the southeast coast. And flying weather tomorrow, good VFR here, all of mainland Alaska, Gulf of Alaska up to the eastern Arctic coast. Marginal stuff here, skiffing the central coast there from, looks like Wainwright to Barrow. Otherwise, IFR out here over the Bering Sea, down to the Aleutians there, over to Amchitka Island, with marginal VFR barely making the southwest coast there, and good VFR across all of the southeast coast. And then for tomorrow afternoon, that pattern shifts eastward just a little bit, bringing a little more marginal VFR up along the southwest coast. I'll say from Togiak Bay there all the way up to the south side of the Seward Peninsula, and looks like IFR, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, definitely across the Pribilofs, again working its way in toward Nunivak Island, extending down to Atka, improving back toward Adak, and IFR spreading along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, all the passes look really good tomorrow. Ceilings visibility's really good for Anatuvik and Adigan, and for Lake Clark and Merrill there, probably the ceilings visibilities will be unlimited, with rainy, same forecast, VFR for windy. Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, at least for a couple of days. Tanita, VFR, Portage, also VFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels late tonight, tomorrow morning. Again, strong upper high pressure through here, and so good northerly winds pulling chillier air down 2,000 feet into the northern panhandle there, with 6,000 feet down toward Dixon Entrance. 8,000 feet coming northward here to the north side of the Seward Peninsula, and 10,000 feet even spreading in over southwest Alaska from Cook Inlet and extending all the way back out to the central Aleutians. And looking at the icing tomorrow, none over the interior, none over the panhandle, but quite a bit, pretty good area of possible maybe occasional widespread moderate here in the orange areas, Alaska Peninsula, and up to the north, this whole area south to north, shifting eastward throughout the day, coming into the Alaska Peninsula. And then that'll continue to move eastward tomorrow night, and of course into Saturday, reaching Kodiak Island, pushing a fair ways in over the southwest interior, and also pushing northward a little bit. Otherwise, for tomorrow, jet stream, tremendous ridge here right over the state and the eastern Bering Sea, coming down, sailing down out of the north, 90 to 100 knot jets here right across the northern panhandle. A really good pattern here for those gusty winds there, and that's why they've got the high wind warning out for the Juneau area. Upper trough there of Vancouver Island, and southeasterly 70 knots cutting across the Fox Islands. And 9,000 foot winds, 50 to 60 knots, blowing right up to the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise 35 to 45, all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. Easterly or westerlies at 25 on the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise very light here, right across the ridge axis or through the ridge axis. Light and variable right down to Prince William Sound. And on the other side of the ridge, pretty strong again, 30 to 40 knots right through here, 15 to 25 as you head south toward Dixon Entrance. And then for 3,000 feet, same pattern, 25 to 40 knots here for the southeast coast, dropping off up over the Yukon. Also dropping off over the interior here, right under the high, southwest 10 across the western Brooks Range there. But those southerlies at 40 to 50 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, up across the eastern Bering Sea and the southwest coast through the Bering Strait. And it looks like 45 to 50 knots here across the Pribilofs and back up toward Nunivak Island, 50 knots out of the south, right across the eastern Aleutian areas. And then wrapping back around that low center, we've got northwesterlies at 50 knots across the central Aleutians, dropping off considerably out towards Shimia. So turbulence-wise, definitely occasional widespread moderate chop here for the northern, central, southeast coast, below about 5,000 feet, with less of that down to the south, cutting off to the north quite abruptly there. As you lose the winds and gradient. Smooth conditions across southern Alaska up to the Arctic coast, and then this area here, the turquoise area, occasional moderate chop below 5,000 feet, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians to the Pribilofs, northward to St. Lawrence Island. Still bumpy, but not as bad up through the Bering Strait to the Point Hope, Cape Lisburne area. And then again with that wraparound northwest wind, gets a little bumpier there for Adak and Atka, again about below 5,000 feet. And after the break of Stargazer, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Cygnus, the amazing celestial swan.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. Now that autumn has begun in the northern hemisphere, it's time to say farewell to the constellations that kept us company all summer long.
That's right, James, and one of the most beloved of these constellations is Cygnus the Swan. Even from brightly lit cities, this is a constellation that's easy to find. But did you know that Cygnus has both a poetic and a scientific history that rivals many of the constellations we can see?
Let's show you.
Okay, we have our skies set for just after sunset any night this week. Almost directly overhead, you can see the familiar stars of the summer triangle. Vega, the brightest star in Lyra the Harp, Altair, the brightest star in Aquila the Eagle, and Deneb, the brightest star in Cygnus the Swan. Cygnus the Swan has been an area of fascination for storytellers and astronomers alike for thousands of years.
To find the swan, simply draw a line from Deneb inward toward the center of the summer triangle. The first star you'll encounter is Seder. This marks the heart of the swan. Then if you draw lines to the west and east of this star, you'll find two more stars. These mark the right and left wings of the swan. Going back to the star Seder, we continue to draw a line outward to form the neck of the swan, ending at the star Alberia.
In one legend, Cygnus the Swan is said to be the great musician Orpheus, who was transformed into a swan and placed in the sky next to his harp, the constellation Lyra.
In another legend, Cygnus is said to be Zeus when he transformed himself into a swan to seduce Leda, the queen of Sparta, who also happened to be the mother of Helen of Troy, Clytemnestra, and the Gemini twins Castor and Pollux.
However, in modern times, Cygnus has turned out to be a place of great discoveries.
During a rocket flight in 1964, a galactic X-ray source known as Cygnus X1 was discovered. Cygnus X1 is now widely accepted to be a candidate for the first black hole we've discovered, and it's estimated to have a mass almost 15 times the mass of our Sun, yet an event horizon radius of only about 16 miles.
In more recent times, Cygnus has been the target of study by NASA's Kepler Space Telescope. The Kepler telescope studied over 100,000 stars in Cygnus. Its goal was to find planets orbiting other stars. And since its mission began, thousands of these extrasolar planets have been discovered and confirmed. The planet Kepler 22b was announced as being the first Earth-like planet orbiting a Sun-like star.
Kepler 22b is over 600 light years away and orbits in the habitable zone where liquid water can exist. With a possible surface temperature of near 73 degrees Fahrenheit, Kepler 22b is quite the Goldilocks planet, if I do say so myself. And speaking of planets, if you ever get lost on Mars, Dehne is the North Star on Mars. We never really think about it, but each of the planets has a different North Star or has no North Star at all.
All the planets in our solar system rotate on an axis. The direction the axis points with respect to the plane of the solar system determines the angle of axial tilt. Our Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees with respect to the plane of our solar system. Mars tilts at 25 degrees and Saturn has a tilt of almost 27 degrees.
However, compare that with Mercury and Jupiter, which barely tilt at all, between 2 and 3 degrees respectively. Yet at the other extreme, you have Venus, which is practically upside down at 177 degrees, and Uranus, which lies on its side at 98 degrees.
So, since every planet tilts in a different direction, each planet should have a different North Star, or no North Star at all. So, that's why our North Pole is pointing near Polaris, and Mars is pointing near Dehne.
So, if you ever get lost on Mars, look for Cygnus the Swan, and you'll find North.
Well, there you have it, the amazing celestial swan Cygnus. And it's all up there for you to see if you remember to keep looking up.
Welcome back. Well, today's analysis of the sea ice looks like this, which looks a lot like what it did yesterday. I was told some of this ice here pushing off that way is actually melting, and with the southerly winds coming in, warmer temperatures, this area here should trend to push off to the north a little bit, at least until the winds change direction or go back to the north. And looking at marine forecasts here for the southeast coast, gales for Lynn Canal, northeast 30, pretty good breeze there through Stevens Passage, north 20 there for Clarence Strait. Out along the coast, gale warnings for the central coast, north-northeast, 35 knots, seas at about 10 feet. Much higher gusts here coming out of the channeled areas along the coastline, and small craft advisories on the south and north coast as well. And then for Saturday, the whole pattern shifts eastward. The ridge moves in a little bit better, so those winds really drop off. West-northwest, 10 to 15 on the north coast, 15 to 20 down south. Also northerlies 15 to 20, varying somewhat there over the inside waters, 3 to 4 foot seas. And Lynn Canal hanging on to 30 knots, but gradually diminishing throughout the day. For Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, tomorrow, light variable winds, 10 knots, seas slight. Same thing from Northern Cook Inlet, northeast 10, south of the Forelands. South to southeast, 10 to 15, Barren Islands there, and Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait into Kamishak Bay, east of 15. Then we've got pretty good gales here in the forecast for Kodiak on the east side there for Saturday. Winds increasing to 30 knots for the Barrens and east 20 for the western North Gulf Coast, but light variable winds continue on the east side, and also for Prince William Sound, Northern Cook Inlet, northeast 20 become east 35 here for the Kamishak Bay. And Bristol Bay, 45 to 50 knots southeasterlies here tomorrow there. Seas up to 20 feet in the Pacific side, southeast 30 knots, southwest of Kodiak, right in across Bristol Bay. Then on Saturday, that next, well actually the front pushes eastward here, so in advance of that, pretty good gales, almost a storm for Bristol Bay, southeast 45, 11-foot seas, 40 knotters there, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 30. And for the eastern Aleutians, we've got gales tomorrow, 35 to 40 knots there out of the south-southeast with 10 to 13, or actually 17-foot seas. North to northwest, 40 knots across the central Aleutians, back out to the west there, then a dramatic drop-off out toward Amchitka, Kiska, and Shimia. Then those swing around back to the southwest, pick up to 30 knots, small craft advisories from there right across the central Aleutians. And then we've got gales out of the northwest there, mostly for Unalaska Island, maybe just to the west as well, but definitely 16 to 18 foot seas. And for the southwest coast, good gales tomorrow. Southeast 35 to 45 knots, right up to St. Lawrence Island. Southeast 30 for the Pribilofs in St. Matthew. And then on Saturday, after the storms here along the coast Saturday night, southeast 40 knots, east 35 for St. Lawrence Island, westerly 35 to 40 knots for the northern Bering Sea to the Pribilofs. And up along the Arctic coast, southwest 20 knots, a little more westerly over toward Demarcation Point, but small craft advisories here from the western coast all the way down to the Bering Strait. And the forecast for Saturday, things become more easterly here, still 30 knots from Whales of Cape Beaufort with 7 to 8 foot seas. And the remainder of the Arctic coast easterly at 20 knots, except here on the east side, looks like about 25 knots, seas 5 feet. And for tonight, again, gusty winds, rain, increasing here along the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Light winds, fair skies, some variable clouds here to the north, especially with this warm front in the eastern Arctic coast. But high pressure building into the Yukon there. High wind warning out for the Juneau area. Winds increasing north to northeast, 40, gusting 70 miles per hour. Continues through tomorrow in that area, at least till 4 p.m. And pretty windy across the remainder of the Panhandle, but sunshine and not so much wind here over the interior. Stronger winds, again, storm warnings for the Alaska Peninsula with a round of heavy rain coming in, all that spreading northward to St. Lawrence Island. And then for Saturday, that front drives eastward. This low center tracks up to Nunivak Island. Rain and wind across the southwest interior from the Seward Peninsula to Kodiak Island. Less wind and sunshine over the Panhandle.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.